Welcome back to the Drukhari YouTube channel. Today we're going to take an in-depth look at my 1,847 points of Witch Cult of Incessant Rage. As you can see, the army is mostly Witch Cult. I have included 2 units of Scourges, and we'll talk about why later. But it's organized mostly into a battalion detachment and a outrider detachment due to the large number of fast attacks that I have. Now, if you've been watching the channel for a while and been following the Witch Cult of Incessant Rage, you know that's led by the 3 succubi triplets. They're very important to the lore of the army. The Witch Cult of Incessant Rage is relatively new in the city of Camorra, and the triplets have broken away from the witch cult that they used to be a part of and started their own. Now I have 3 witches, succubus. Each one is armed differently, and that's mostly for narrative reasons. Traditionally, the warlord of my army has been the succubi Anna. She's armed with a blast pistol, probably by far the best weapon to arm your succubus with. It does consistent damage. The Archite glaive really does well in close combat. It's probably their best close combat weapon. And she's just generally all around great headquarters character, relatively cheap for the army. And she can support the witches, which are abundant, obviously, in this army, as well as take down enemies on her own, either with the blast pistol or with the Archite glaive. Now, she has 2 sisters. The next one is going to be Dolly. Dolly is armed with an agonizer. And since Chapter Approved was recently released, Dolly's kind of taking over the Witch Cult of Incessant Rage on some of our real space raids. And the reason why is because I really like the new warlord trait for the witches, and that is Blood Dancer, which allows her to inflict 3 hits instead of just 1 if she rolls a 6+. Now, one of the problems with the Archite glaive, which is the better weapon, is that it's -1 to hit, meaning that Power from Pain doesn't kick in and give you a +1 to hit until turn 3. So in turns 1 and 2, you can't ever have that proc, unfortunately. But with the agonizer, you certainly can, starting from turn 1, and by the time you get to turn 3 and you get that +1 to hit bonus from Power from Pain, then she's hitting on 5s and 6s, which will do 3 wounds each. Not 3 wounds, but 3 hits. So it's pretty effective. And then you have everyone's favorite Kitty. She's the youngest of the 3 triplets, born last, and she has an Impaler. Now, the Impaler is not a very good weapon. It does 2 damage, but it's at strength 3. So when I look at combat drugs, Anna normally gets the +1 toughness to make her more survivable. With the new warlord trait, Dolly almost always takes +1 attack. And Kitty really enjoys to move quickly, so she'll take the +2 speed a lot of times. The core of my battalion detachment are the 3 units of witches. I run a unit of 10, which allows me to have 2 witch weapons, and by far, in my opinion, the best witch weapon is, of course, the Hydra Gauntlets, allowing for rerolls of wounds, while the Hecatrix is armed with a blast pistol, phantasm grenade launcher, and an agonizer. The agonizer certainly helps settle the score against some of the higher toughness models, even Space Marines at toughness 4, because you're always wounding on 4s. The blast pistol, great against vehicles, great against infantry at -4 armor penetration. And the Phantasm Grenade Launcher, -1 to opponents' morale, can be pretty effective. The next unit of witches has 9 in it. That allows one of my succubuses to ride in a raider with those witches. Again, you see the Hydra Gauntlets, for reasons I already spoke about, and similarly armed Hecatrix with the blast pistol, Phantasm Grenade Launcher, and the agonizer. Lastly, I have a small unit of 5 witches. They ride in my Venom here. Unfortunately, the Venom can only carry 5 witches, so it's a limited utility as far as a transport. But it does allow me to have 1 unit of witches move around pretty quickly and tie things up in a pinch. That Hecatrix is armed with a power sword to save some points, and a splinter pistol, and then 1 witch has a witch weapon, and the razor flails will allow her to reroll fail to hit. Now, normally my witch units will have a succubus close by. The exception to that one is that 5-person witch squad. who sometimes find themselves operating on their own. And since you have to use all the combat drugs before you can start reassigning them and have the same one pick twice, that unit of 5 will normally take the +1 weapon skill. Allows them to operate on their own, and then it saves some of the better combat drugs for the other squads. The problem with the +1 weapon skill is that by turn 3, Power from Pain already gives you +1 to hit. 1s always fail. So you're hitting on 2s at that point regardless. So the +1 weapon skill doesn't really help you out except for the first 2 rounds. So you'll see them get stuck in early quite often. The squad of 10 witches is normally taking the combat drug that gives them +2 leadership. They're the most likely to take the most casualties and still be able to bounce back. So I like to keep them. Obviously, if I lose 5 witches out of the 5 witch squad, they're dead. If I lose 5 witches out of the 10 witch squad, that +2 leadership can really keep them in the fight, which is very useful. And then the squad of 9 will, depending upon the enemy, potentially get +1 attack. That's great against guard or Tau or anything that has toughness 3 models. +1 strength, which is good against things with higher toughness like Space Marines and so many other armors, Necrons. Or potentially they can get another combat drug, which will help them out. But they're very mobile, 8-inch move, and effective at especially tying up infantry units with the special witch roll, which makes infantry units that want to disengage from them beat them in a roll-off. The next unit I'll talk about are my Reaver Jetbikes. I have 12 of them. 2 are armed with blasters and grav talons, and 2 are armed with heat lances and grav talons. Now with 12, I can either run them in 2 units of 6 or 4 units of 3. The units of 3 offer me a bunch of tactical flexibility, while the unit of 6s reduces the number of drops my army makes, which is already considerable considering all the models that I have in an 1850 point list. Now, in an army that's very fast, these Reaver Jetbikes are stupid fast. Able to move 16 inches base, combined with potentially combat drug for +2 movement, or by advancing during the move phase, always advancing 6 inches. They are an incredibly mobile unit. Their shooting is mediocre, I would say. The blasters definitely help, while the heat lances are normally disappointing, but against certain armies like Tau battle suits or a unit army with a lot of characters, very effective because they roll kind of like a melta weapon, where if you're within 9 inches, you're doing 2d6 and taking highest. And their close combat abilities are good, but not great. They have a fixed strength of 4 and AP -1, which combined with 2 attacks apiece allows you to do some pretty decent damage. Now, with that speed, they can do turn 1 charges pretty efficiently, or later on during the game, secure objectives for you. They are also one of the tougher units in my army, being toughness 4 with a 4-up save. Number of combat drugs works really well with them, like I mentioned, +2 movement, +1 attack, with the base 2 attacks going up to 3. Even a unit of 3 can be putting out 10 attacks when they make a charge. +1 toughness is always a good situational drug as well. If you're going up against a unit with a lot of bolters, an army with a lot of bolters, making them toughness 5 makes them much more survivable. One of the things with running units at 3, what it allows me to do is really tailor those combat drugs. Now with this many witches and witch units in my army, I'm able to take every combat drug once and then spread out the other combat drugs as I see fit. So I can have multiple units with the +2 move or with the +1 attack, and it can be very effective, especially as you choose that right before you play the game. Now with the Reavers, they are very expensive at this point, probably overcosted for what they do, but that said, they're still a really good unit, and I get a lot of utility from them. I have 2 units of Hellions, which take up fast attack slots as well, which really helps fill out that Outrider detachment. Each one is 10 witches riding their hoverboards. They're really good at shooting. They get assault 2 weapons at 18 inches, and they're really good at close combat with their weapons doing 2 damage each at +1 strength. So at 4 strength, which is more than most of the units in the army, and doing 2 damage apiece, they are my in extremis force against vehicles when things like dark lances or blasters fail to do it. What makes them really good though is their 14-inch movement and their special unit ability called hit and run. Hit and run allows you to disengage from close combat. Since they're a flying unit, they can shoot normally, and then they can charge again. So you can really hit that first line of screening units that an enemy puts forward, and then the next turn jump them out of combat and start hitting those backline units. With Chapter Approved recently released, these guys benefit greatly from the webway portal. One of the problems with the Hellions is they're not very resilient. They are essentially guardsmen with a 6+ feel no pain. And so keeping them off the board until turn 2 when they can start rerolling charges, or turn 3 where they get +1 to hit, can prove very effective. So you can drop them in when you need them, and they're going to be more able to get that charge off, that 9-inch charge off, or they're going to be more effective once they get into combat. The Phantasm grenade launcher is on both sergeants as well. Heliarchs, as they're called in the Dark Elder Army. And combined with the amount of shooting power that they have and the amount of close combat attacks that they get, can prove pretty devastating to enemy armies. The last thing I'll add about them is they're an extremely flexible army unit. They do benefit from the proximity of the succubus, and rerolling ones means they can do a ton of damage. Each one has base 2 attacks, so even though they're AP- weapons, they can take down vehicles, or they can take down other units that have either multiple wounds or have their own sort of feel no pain, such as Death Guard, where they're having to roll 2 dice trying to make that 5 up as opposed to just 1, which you know can be pretty devastating when the opponent is rolling hot. As far as combat drugs, if I'm expecting a lot of toughness 8 vehicles like the Imperial Guard has with their Lehman Russes, or Land Raiders or things like that, +1 strength makes a lot of sense, so you're winning on 5s and not 6s. Otherwise, I do enjoy them with the +1 attack, of course, or +1 toughness, or +2 move. It's really dependent upon what army I'm facing that day. So while this army was originally conceived as just witches, a witch cult army, I found myself lacking in anti-tank firepower. And with a lot of the witch cult and Drukhari models being sold out right now, my options were fairly limited on what I could get for anti-tank. Now, the transport vehicles are pretty good, but they're only armed with 1 Dark Lance, so I need to get more Dark Lances in my army. And the way I did that was by introducing some Scourges. And I have 2 units of Scourges. The first one is armed with 2 Dark Lances and provides me that long-range sniper type anti-tank weaponry, which is so important. And then I have a unit which is armed with 2 blasters, and the Solarite has a blast pistol and a power spear. What's great about this, they fit in very well to the witch cult theme. They're fast at 14 inches, and they do provide that anti-tank firepower that's so lacking with just the witch units. I do like to deep strike both of them, even though the -1 to hit penalty is pretty steep when bringing in your Scourges on that turn 1. You can bring them in on turn 1 into terrain where their 4-up save becomes a 3-up save, and they're surprisingly resilient unless you're facing mass firepower, and the -1 to hit penalty goes away after that first turn. Over on the blaster side, you bring them in 9 inches away from the enemy and start hitting them up with blasters. The shard carbines are a pretty effective weapon as well, and unlike some of the other units which are overcosted in the witch cult army, the Scourges are probably about right, and the shard carbine gives you 3 splinter shots each model, so they can do pretty good against anti-infantry models. I've been so impressed with them, not to mention that they're absolutely phenomenal looking models. I'm thinking about adding a 3rd unit of Scourges, which would just be equipped with shard carbines, allowing me to increase the number of Dark Lances and blasters in these other 2 units. They're also really good at scoring objectives at the end of games with that mobility. It's really weird when you look at the witch cult army that the witches with their mobility of 8 is actually the slowest unit I have in the army. it just gives you a ton of tactical flexibility, especially as you get towards the end game. You don't have many models left, but neither does your opponent. You're much better able to capitalize on your position at that time. I have 3 dedicated transports for the Army. I have a Venom, which is a pretty effective shooting platform. The enemy is at -1 to hit it, makes it a little bit more survivable, and it has a 5-up invulnerable save. Now, I arm mine with a splinter cannon on top and the dual splinter rifles on bottom. You do give up a little bit of shooting capability as opposed to the models which are armed with dual splinter cannons. But the splinter cannon for 15 points is a bit overpriced, and you're not losing too much with the dual splinter rifles, especially as you get in within 12 inches, which is normally where it wants to get into anyway. It's a pretty effective platform in close combat. Not that it's going to do a lot of damage, although it's hitting non-force with 2 attacks at -1 AP, but it screens my witches from having to face Overwatch, because witches are very vulnerable to Overwatch with a 6+ save, and only their feel no pain after that, and their toughness 3. At toughness 5, this really does the job more often than not of taking the brunt of that Overwatch fire, getting in there, allowing the witches to come in unmolested. This is split between its importance. It's an important fire support platform with all the splinter fire, and it's an important transport capability, limited by just being able to take 5 models. The Raiders that I have 2 of them, are great transports. And I would say their primary purpose is the transport witches rather than to be a firing platform. Now, the Dark Lances are great. Those are my 3rd and 4th Dark Lances in the Army, so they are important. But most people who play Dark Eldar, for whatever reason, find their Dark Lances to be unreliable. You watch my battle reports, you'll see the same thing. Either they have troubles hitting, even though they're hitting on 3s. Dark Lances mounted on vehicles don't suffer from the heavy weapon movement penalty because they become assault weapons, or they fail to wound, or when you do wound, they tend to do 1 or 2 damage. So much more important than that is the ability to move the witches across the table quickly and protect them as they're moving across the table. Then they have the secondary function, just like the Venom, of taking that initial charge into the enemy, taking the Overwatch fire, surviving that, allowing the witches or the Hellions to go in unmolested. Overall, they're well appointed and they do a good job. Transport capacity of 10 is somewhat limiting. That's why I have a unit of 9 witches as opposed to 2 units of 10 witches. So I can put 1 of the succubus in the transport with them. So overall, very happy with them, and they do the job in 8th edition. So why play this army? The Witch Cult have been a ton of fun for me to play. Before the witches, I just played Imperial armies. This is an entirely different play style and different mentality required to play them. As I've spoken to before, they are incredibly fast. They do well in close combat, and they have a ton of tactical flexibility with the combat drugs and the power from pain. When I play my opponents, they are normally quite surprised by how fast they are and how easily I can move them into position to take advantage of that positioning. With Witch Cults, you're able to pick your fights very well, and you can hit the enemy where he's weak and then move on from there. You can really control the game with a Witch Cult army, and that's what I find most interesting about them. Now, right now, at 1,850 points, pre-Codex, this is an Index army, they suffer from a couple of things. The Reavers are overcosted at 30 points each. The Hellions are probably overcosted because even though they hit like a ton of bricks, they do die very quickly. Witches don't kill much, although they do allow you board control and the ability to dictate combat a lot with the no escape rule, which prevents enemy units from withdrawing if they're infantry. And the Scourges have a lot of firepower. Overall, I've been finding them very effective, and you can just go ahead and watch the battle reports to see. I am new to this army, just started collecting 4 or 5 months ago, and they've been just performing phenomenally well, in addition to being a ton of fun to play. On top of that, this army has been a ton of fun to paint. I've been inspired by the models, which have been great since they came out in 5th edition. And there's a number of cheap ways to get in the army. As you can see, I got 2 of the boxes, Gangs of Kimura, that form the core of my army. And then I was able to pick up a couple of boxes of the old the combined Raider and Witches. I forget what it was called, but you know, effectively building my force up pretty quickly. And the Scourges came a little bit later. Where the Witch Cult of Incessant Rage really suffers is they're not very durable. But with this amount of models on the table, what I have found is that I will have enough survive at the end of the game to jump on the objectives and eventually win that game. They do a decent job of killing the opponent, but they're going to die very quickly in return. One unit of Tau shooting focused against a witch unit of 10 witches is going to kill them, and that can hurt at 9 points per model. But at the same time, if he kills 2 out of my 3 Reavers, that one Reaver is normally going to disengage, and for the rest of the game, going to be moving from objective to objective, scoring on Maelstrom of War missions, or just hiding out waiting for that last turn. And that's where the Eldar trickery really comes in handy, is you can surprise your opponent at the very end by jumping on those objectives. So I don't know where I'm going to go from here. I'm waiting for the Codex to come out to repoint some of these models and let me know what the advantages of, if any, of running an all-witch cult army is going to be. But I'm really happy with where I'm at 1850. Potentially going to add some Cabal Warriors because they're a real good cheap troop choice. More Scourges, as I mentioned, more Raiders for transport capacity. This army offers so many opportunities that it's really got my head spinning, trying to figure out where I want to go to get this up to a 2,000 point army and beyond. The only thing I'm sure of right now is I don't want to run a Hemoculus unit, because I really don't enjoy the models or the fluff for them. I like the Witches, and I'm going to stick to them as much as possible. Overall, I give this army an A+, just on the fun of playing them, and then they get bonus extra credit, if you will, for being a pretty competitive army, at least in my local meta. So, be interested to hear your thoughts about the Witch Cult of Incessant Rage. If you have any questions, just hit me up on the YouTube channel. I answer all the responses that go up there. And let me know where you think the Witch Cult of Incessant Rage is lacking after you look at some of the battle reports, or you think there's some opportunities that I haven't taken advantage of yet. So, as always, we love you guys watching our YouTube videos. We'll do more of these if this proves popular. There's plenty of other armies that we can do an army focus on. 17th Shetland Light Dragoons comes to mind, but beyond that, Sisters of Battle are also there, and then we can have some of the other regular players come talk about their armies, which would be fun. So let me know what you think. If you like this video, please hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and check out all the great battle reports that we do here on the War Corgi YouTube channel. We're looking forward to a very strong 2018 as we continue to improve the channel, and that's all possible thanks to your comments. So until next time, take care.